The day the Vreth pack cast out Kale Vera, it rained. Not the warm, hunting rains that the predator clans celebrated with howls and ceremony, but the cold, grey kind that seeped into wounds and made small things feel smaller. Kale was 7 cycles old, barely past his first shed, his spotted fur still carrying the pale markings of a juvenile. He was the runt of the Vreth bloodline, the smallest born in 4 generations, and the elders had made their decision with the kind of quiet cruelty that is somehow worse than rage. The weak do not strengthen the pack, Elder Soreth had said. They dilute it. No ceremony. No farewell howl. Just the boundary stones of Vreth territory, and the vast, alien wilderness beyond them, a wilderness that, on the planet Durith, was not truly wilderness at all. It was the edge of something the Vreth had always warned their cubs about. Human settlement. Mara Ellison found him 3 kilometers past the boundary stones, half submerged in a drainage ditch beside Survey Road 7, shivering so violently she initially mistook him for a malfunctioning piece of machinery. She was 41 years old, a xenobiological field officer with the Terran Outreach Commission, and she had spent 16 years on Durith documenting species that largely wanted nothing to do with her. The Vreth especially. Proud, territorial, deeply suspicious of the soft bipeds who had arrived a century ago and inexplicably decided to stay. She pulled over her transport vehicle, walked to the ditch in the rain, and looked down at the small spotted creature at the bottom of it. Kale Vera looked back up at her with amber eyes that held, even then, something that was not quite fear and not quite defiance, something in between, like a creature deciding which one to choose. "Hey," Mara said. Just that. No clinical xenobiological assessment. No protocol. Just hey, in the same tone she'd have used for a lost dog. She held out her hand. He bit it. She did not pull away. That, more than anything, was what Kale Vera would remember for the rest of his life, the human who held her bleeding hand steady and simply waited. He stayed. Not because he trusted her, at first. He stayed because he had nowhere else to go, and because the small dwelling she lived in was warm, and because she fed him without making him feel like charity. She fed him the way you feed someone who is hungry, without commentary, without the weight of debt pressed into every meal. She called him Kale. The Vreth never used first names alone, it was considered presumptuous, a declaration of false intimacy. But Mara Ellison spoke his name the way humans apparently spoke all names, easily, casually, like names were just sounds that meant you, and you were worth addressing. It unsettled him. He decided, eventually, that he did not mind being unsettled. She taught him Terran Standard because, she said, if you're going to live in my house and judge my cooking, you should at least be able to tell me what's wrong with it. He learned it with the ferocious speed of a creature who had always known that knowledge was the only resource the small could accumulate without being robbed. In return, though she never asked, never implied there was a return to be made, he taught her Vreth. The real Vreth. Not the simplified trade dialect most humans used, but the layered tonal language of the packs, where the same word could mean enemy or worthy opponent or one I have not yet decided about depending on which register you sang it in. Mara had a good ear. She learned the difference between Kaveth spoken flat and Kaveth spoken rising, and understood, without Kale having to explain, that the second one was a compliment. She was the first non-Vreth he had ever given one to. Years passed. Kale Vera grew. The Vreth were predator clan species. Their runts, if they survived, sometimes became something the pack historians called Vrethkai, the outliers, the ones whose smallness had never been corrected and so had learned to compensate in other directions. Faster thinking. Better pattern recognition. A particular talent for understanding creatures that were not themselves. Living with a human had accelerated every one of those tendencies. At 14 cycles, Kale enrolled in the Terran Outreach Commission's cross-species liaison program. At 17, he passed their diplomatic certification with the highest score a non-human candidate had ever achieved. At 22, he led the first successful negotiation between the Vreth Southern Compact and the Terran Agricultural Cooperative over water rights, a dispute that had been quietly festering for 30 years. He sat across the table from Elder Sortha's successor and spoke Vreth with an accent that was pure Vreth Highland, and Terran Standard without a trace of it. And he translated not just words but intentions between two peoples who had spent a century assuming the worst of each other. The new elder looked at him afterward with an expression Cale had learned, by then, to read precisely. "Where did you come from?" "The boundary stones," Cale said pleasantly. "You may remember. He did not build an army the way the old stories meant it. No battalions. No war drums. What Cale Vera built was something the Vreth had no word for yet, because they had never thought to want it. He built a network, 50 Terran xenobiologists who spoke real Vreth, trained by Cale and Mara over a decade, 30 Vreth liaisons who had chosen, voluntarily, to learn Terran law and Terran medicine and Terran engineering. A joint crisis response unit that had, in the last 3 years, responded to 4 natural disasters on Durith and saved lives that belonged to both species without stopping to check the paperwork on which was which. When the Kethra blight swept through the northern grazing territories and threatened to collapse the prey populations that 3 Vreth packs depended on for survival, it was Cale's network that mobilized the Terran agricultural scientists who understood soil remediation. It was Cale who stood in front of the Pack Council and explained the human solution in Vreth terms they could accept, not charity, but alliance, the ancient compact between hunters who faced a threat too large for one pack. The packs listened. The Terrans worked. The blight receded. Afterward, Elder Karath of the Northern Compact, a different elder than the one who had cast him out, but from the same bloodline, trained in the same traditions, approached Cale at the edge of the remediated fields. "The small cub that was cast into the rain," Karath said. It was not quite an apology. The Vreth did not have a direct word for apology, they had acknowledgement of miscalculation, which was functionally similar but carried less shame. "I remember," Cale said. "You returned with." Karath paused, searching for the right Vreth register. "With strength we do not have a category for." Cale considered this. Beside him, Mara Ellison was talking with 3 Vreth junior liaisons about soil pH levels, her Vreth tonal register nearly perfect, her hands moving in the gestures that, in Highland dialect, indicated collaborative problem-solving rather than instruction. The juniors were leaning in, engaged, asking questions. "You cast out the cub," Cale said to the elder, "because you measured strength by pack weight. By how much a cub could add to the hunt." He tilted his head, a human gesture he'd absorbed so thoroughly it had become his own. "I spent 20 years living with a species that measures strength differently." "How?" Karath asked. Cale watched Mara laugh at something one of the juniors said, the sound easy and unguarded in the way that had once baffled him and now seemed, simply, like the most natural thing in the world. "By how many you can bring with you," he said. "By how many you can make strong, instead of how many you can outrun." The treaty that established the Durith Joint Stewardship Compact was signed 11 months later. It was the first formal, mutual agreement in the history of Vreth-Terran relations, not a trade deal, not a boundary arrangement, but a declaration of shared responsibility for the planet they both, now undeniably, called home. Cale Vera signed it first. Then Mara Ellison. Then the 5 pack elders. Then the Terran Commission governor. Mara leaned over to him afterward, in the quiet after the ceremony, when the hall was still full of 2 species trying to figure out the etiquette of celebrating together. "You know," she said, "when I found you in that ditch, I really just wanted to get you dry and fed." "I know," Cale said. "I did not have a 20-year plan." "I know that too." She smiled, that particular human expression he had mapped completely, every variation, by the time he was 10 cycles old. This one was the warm kind. The "I am glad this happened" kind. "Was it enough?" she asked. "Does it feel like enough?" Cale Vera looked out at the hall, at his network, his people, the 2 species learning the gestures of each other's languages, and thought about a small spotted cub standing in a cold ditch, deciding whether to choose fear or defiance. He had chosen, in the end, something neither. He had chosen forward. "It's a start," he said.